On December 18, 1944, the Ardennes forest is quiet in the wrong way. Snow absorbs sound. Trees stand stiff and black against a gray sky. In a shallow American foxhole outside Bastogne, Corporal Eddie Voss adjusts his headphones and listens to the static breathe. Eddie is not supposed to listen like this. He is a Signal Corps radio operator. His job is relay, not interpretation. Receive, log, pass up the chain. Never transmit on enemy frequencies, never interfere, never improvise. Doctrine exists for a reason. Then the German voice comes through clearly, cutting clean through the snow-crackled ether. A panzer unit. Calm, professional, issuing movement orders. Eddie straightens. The words matter. Not because they are German. Eddie grew up bilingual, learned the language from his mother before he ever learned to shoot, but because the content is precise. Grid references, timings, a route that curves through a narrow forest road, and at the end of it, a destination Eddie recognizes immediately. An American rest area. 300 infantrymen sleeping, weapons stacked, engines cold. They believe the front line is miles away. They are wrong. Eddie feels the moment tighten around him. If he stays silent, the order goes through. If he speaks, he becomes a criminal. The rule is simple. Never transmit on enemy frequencies. The punishment is not subtle. Court-martial, prison, possibly execution in wartime conditions. Signal doctrine is built on fear of chaos. One unauthorized transmission can compromise an entire network. One wrong voice can unravel trust. The system survives by obedience. But the system also assumes time. The Ardennes offensive has removed that assumption. German forces are moving faster than intelligence can track. Lines are broken. Units overlap. Radios pick up voices that no one has time to authenticate properly. Encryption is inconsistent. Fatigue is everywhere. And right now, somewhere in the forest, a panzer commander is trusting the voice he hears. Eddie pulls the headphones off and looks toward his commanding officer, Captain Morrison, hunched over a map table inside a canvas shelter. "Sir," Eddie says, "I intercepted something." Morrison listens as Eddie translates. The words land heavily. A clean attack. Well-timed. Lethal. Morrison's jaw tightens. "Log it," he says. "Send it up." Eddie hesitates. "By the time it reaches intel," he says carefully, "they'll already be moving." Morrison meets his eyes. "We do not transmit on enemy nets." There is no anger in his voice, just certainty. Doctrine is how you stop individuals from deciding who lives and dies. Eddie nods and turns back to his set. 10 minutes pass. The German voice comes again. Same cadence, same authority. No code challenge, no authentication, just assumption. That's when Eddie understands something that doctrine never covered. The enemy isn't being reckless. They are being human. Familiarity has replaced verification. A known voice is enough. The war has gone on too long. Everyone is tired. Everyone wants things to work the way they are supposed to. Eddie imagines the road, the minefield he knows is there, laid weeks earlier, carefully mapped, meant as a last resort. He imagines panzer tracks chewing into snow, steel mass rolling forward because a voice told him it was safe. He imagines what happens if the voice changes. He takes the headphones off again. "Sir," he says quietly, "if someone told him to reroute—" Morrison cuts him off. "No." The answer is immediate. "No one here gives orders to German armor. That's not our role. That's not legal. That's not war. That's something else. Eddie understands what Morrison is really saying. If Eddie speaks, the system cannot protect him. If Eddie stays silent, the system remains intact. The radio crackles again. Eddie watches Morrison for a long moment. Then he reaches down and disconnects a cable, just enough to kill the set. "What are you doing?" Morrison snaps. "Sir," Eddie says, voice steady now, "you didn't hear this next part." Morrison steps forward. "Corporal!" Eddie is already moving. Later, no one will agree on exactly how it happened. Some will say Eddie stole a handset. Others will say the radio was unattended for a moment too long. The official record will be vague, deliberately so. What matters is this. At 1940 hours, on a German Panzer frequency, a familiar voice comes through. The accent is right. The tone is impatient. The authority is unquestioned. The voice gives new orders, a detour, a minor change, a safer route, through a snow-covered forest road, straight into a minefield. On the American side of the line, Eddie Voss lowers the microphone and waits. Static fills the silence. No one speaks. No one corrects the order. And somewhere in the dark, engines turn, tracks bite into frozen ground, and men trust a voice they have no reason to doubt. The radio goes quiet in a way Eddie Voss has never heard before. Not dead, just empty. Static without urgency. No clipped German confirmations. No irritated follow-up. No request to repeat the order. That silence is worse than noise. Eddie keeps the headphones on, listening for the sound of correction. For the moment someone realizes the voice was wrong, the phrasing unfamiliar, the authority misplaced. Nothing comes. Captain Morrison stands behind him now, close enough that Eddie can smell cold canvas and stale coffee. "You just crossed the line," Morrison says. "Yes, sir." "You understand what you've done?" Eddie does. Perfectly. He has impersonated a German officer. He has transmitted false orders on an enemy net. If discovered, he is not protected by doctrine, rank, or uniform. He is not a soldier following orders. He is a saboteur. Outside, the forest remains unchanged. Snow drifts lazily, no explosions, no confirmation that anything at all has happened. War, at this distance, gives no feedback. Minutes pass. Then, far away, muffled by trees and terrain, the ground moves. Not a single blast. A sequence. A heavy concussive rhythm rolling through frozen earth. The sound arrives late, as if the forest itself is reluctant to repeat it. Morrison closes his eyes. Eddie does not. He imagines the moment instead. German half-tracks turning where they should not. Tank commanders trusting the order because the voice was right. Tracks crunching forward until steel meets pressure plates buried weeks earlier. Minds do not argue. They do not reconsider. They finish conversations. The radio erupts suddenly, not with panic, but confusion. Shouting, overlapping voices, broken transmissions cut short by interference, by shock, by men who do not yet understand what has gone wrong. Then silence returns. This time, it stays. No American units report contact that night. 300 men wake in the morning, stretch stiff limbs, complain about cold rations, and never learn how close they came to dying in their sleep. They will never know Eddie Voss's name. By dawn, Morrison has already begun the cleanup. No report mentions a false transmission. No log reflects the moment the radio went dark. Eddie's headset time is altered. Frequencies are scrubbed. The incident becomes a gap, something that does not need explanation. because no one wants one. You saved lives, Morrison tells him quietly later. But if this ever comes out, I know, Eddie says, he does. The war does not pause to reward him. It moves on. German units adapt. They tighten procedures. Codes reappear. Authentication returns. The window Eddie exploited closes as quietly as it opened. The Ardennes remains a killing ground, and Eddie returns to his role, receiving, logging, relaying, never again transmitting a single unauthorized word. Weeks later, intelligence reports confirm the minefield incident in sanitized language. Enemy armor encountered unexpected obstacles. Movement delayed, losses sustained, no cause is listed, no credit assigned. Eddie reads the report and feels nothing like triumph, because he knows something the report does not, that the outcome hinged not on firepower or planning or technological superiority, but on trust, on the simple human habit of believing familiar voices in moments of exhaustion. The German commander, Klaus, Eddie learns later from intercepted chatter, was not incompetent. He was experienced, cautious, methodical, and that is why the deception worked. Professional soldiers expect chaos from amateurs. They do not expect it from voices that sound like their own. That is the cruel symmetry of what Eddie did. He did not defeat the enemy by being smarter. He defeated them by being believable. After the war, Eddie will not speak about Bastogne. There is no medal waiting, no citation drafted, nothing to gain from explaining a moment that cannot be officially acknowledged without condemning the system that survived it. The Signal Corps will teach obedience. Doctrine will remain intact. Unauthorized transmissions will stay forbidden. And Eddie Voss will return to civilian life carrying a truth he cannot comfortably share, that sometimes the line between heroism and crime is defined not by outcome, but by whether the institution is willing to admit it needed you to break its rules. The static fades, the war moves on, and one voice, used once, perfectly, disappears back into the noise, exactly where the system needs it to stay. Years later, the war is reduced to maps, arrows, and dates. The Ardennes offensive becomes a chapter title. Bastogne becomes a symbol of endurance. The bulge is studied, debated, quantified. Eddie Voss is not mentioned. In official histories, German armor stalls because of logistics, because of weather, because of resistance, because of mines placed earlier in the campaign. All of those things are true. None of them explain why 40 armored vehicles followed a route that did not exist on any map. That explanation never enters the record, because it would require admitting something the system cannot afford to admit, that for a few minutes the outcome of hundreds of lives rested not on command authority or doctrine, but on a single man deciding that obedience was more dangerous than disobedience. Eddie returns home after the war with no stories that fit polite conversation. He goes back to civilian work, fixes lines, restores power, listens to static for a living without ever letting it mean too much again. He does not tell people that he once spoke with a voice that was not his own. He does not tell them that he remembers the exact cadence of German commands better than he remembers the faces of some men he served with. He does not tell them that sometimes, late at night, he still waits for a reply that never came. The German commander, Klaus, does not return home at all. There is no villain in that part of the story, no stupidity to mock, just a professional soldier who trusted procedure in a moment when procedure had quietly dissolved. That is the cruelty of modern war. It does not punish incompetence alone. It punishes exhaustion. It punishes trust. The minefield that stopped the Panzer column is cleared weeks later. Engineers mark the craters, log the debris, and move on. Steel is cut away. Snow melts. Spring erases most of the evidence. Only the radio frequencies remain unchanged. They hum with other voices, other orders, other assumptions. The Signal Corps revises manuals after the war. Encryption improves. Authentication protocols are tightened. Entire sections are added to prevent the kind of vulnerability Eddie exploited. The system learns, but it learns without saying how, because systems do not like to acknowledge that their greatest strength, obedience, can become their most dangerous weakness. If Eddie had asked permission, 300 men would have died. If Eddie had been caught, the war would not have changed, but his life would have ended in disgrace. That is the balance the institution never records. History prefers clean causality, orders, movements, outcomes. It does not like moments where the right action cannot be justified in advance, only after the fact. So Eddie Voss fades from the story exactly as required, not because he failed, but because acknowledging him would force a question that has no safe answer. If saving lives sometimes requires breaking the rules, then who is responsible for the lives lost while waiting for permission? The Ardennes forest stands quiet now. Snow still falls there in winter. Radios no longer crackle with desperate orders. The minefields are gone. But the lesson remains buried deeper than any explosive. That in war, the most powerful weapon is not firepower or armor or language, but the human tendency to trust a familiar voice. And the most dangerous moment is when someone realizes that trust can be turned once into silence. After that, history closes the channel, and the static takes over.